Okay, hi folks. Welcome to the first sort of Vertic virtual event. That's a bit of a mouthful, but welcome to the first Vertic virtual event around fundraising projects, and focusing on some technical side of things and some process and solution side of things. We've got some guests today that we'll be putting some questions to and asking them to share some of their experiences in the implementation and the process they worked through in implementing a fundraising solution using the Salesforce platform. So you'll hear certainly much more from our guests today than from myself. And really, the goal is to focus less on the technical side of things and put the focus more so on the process. So the steps that the individuals and their organizations went through as part of the implementation, hopefully some learnings from the process, and just start to understand how they went through their decision in order to choose or select the appropriate fundraising solution, and then the steps from that initial selection through to implementation and the all important go live. So you can see from today we've got some guests that will be sharing their experiences. And so on the call today we've got Luke from Greenpeace. There's Amool from Trust for Nature, Victor from Salesforce, from salesforce.org, and Jan also from Vertic. So before we get into any of the sort of discussion, I'll go around and ask each of you to introduce yourselves and provide us a little bit of background about your role and some sort of your involvement in the fundraising side of the project. So I'll start with you, Luke. If you could give everyone on the call just some background about yourself and the role you played in terms of the fundraising implementation.
Sure. So my name's Luke Giuliani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Greenpeace. And as the Chief Technology Officer, my role was to roll out the project from where to go, really. So when I first came in, I was tasked with looking across our technology needs and figuring out where we were at and where we needed to go. And it was pretty clear that we had a way to go. And so my responsibility was effectively to figure out what that would look like, what tools we might need, how we're going to implement it, who we're going to work with, how we're going to do the change management, all the way through to launching, and then round 2, round 3, round 4, round whatever we're up to by now.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll certainly there'll be some questions for the people on the call. There'll be some questions that Luke will go into more detail around some of those points he's just highlighted now as well. And Amool, yourself, could you introduce yourself to people on the call?
Hello, everyone. I'm Amool. I'm Amool Notalapati. I am from Trust for Nature Victoria. I'm actually a technology consultant with Trust for Nature Victoria. Trust for Nature Victoria is a very small organization, so it gives me an opportunity to wear a number of hats within the organization in the technology space. When I first came into TFN, we had MS Access database and another third-party cloud-based fundraising solution that never talked to each other. And these two databases together provided a way of staff to manage Trust for Nature's two core business requirements, which is conservation of land and wildlife and fundraising, being a not-for-profit. And so when I came in, the mandate was for us to find a solution that helped us come up with a product that can do just the land management. However, we end up with Salesforce, which I will go a little bit more deeper into during the Q&A time. We ended up with Salesforce for both fundraising and conservation management database. During this process, I wore a number of hats: project management, application assessment, and technology assessment, project management, some areas of technical implementation, staff training, documentation, working with Vertic as a partner, and also working with another partner overseas in USA, from end to end in the implementation of Salesforce. But we will be looking a little bit more deeper into our fundraising part of it today, I believe. Thank you.
That's correct. Thanks, Amool, and you absolutely, as you said, you will expand on some of those points in the Q&A. And from the platform side, we've got Victor White on the call. So Victor, did you want to similarly introduce yourself and provide some background around your role at salesforce.org?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So hi, everyone. It's great to be on the call with two of our incredible customers today. My name is Victor White. I'm an account executive here on the not-for-profit team. So we're a team of about 30 people that look after not-for-profits all across ANZ. It's a wonderful part of the business to be in, and really dedicated to bringing out and unlocking the mission that these incredible customers, like we've got on the call today, unlocking their mission and helping them achieve that. So it's great to be on the call. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of Luke's and Amool's info into what the actual business end of the solution is like.
Excellent. Thanks, Victor. And certainly don't be offended if I direct more questions towards Luke and Amool for the sake of the session. And lastly, Jan, did you want to, coming from the partner side or the implementation side, I'll ask you to do actually two things. If you could introduce yourself and I guess Vertic as an entity, and also some of the core themes you'd like to touch on for today's session, and I guess some of the drive or some rationale behind organizing the session and putting it together.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jan Tenenberg, and together with Steve, we started Vertic about 10 years ago on a number of principles that we stuck to ever since. And those are all around achieving a social mission with technology. We want to use it for good, and we really want to make a difference using our skill set in the social sector in Australia and New Zealand. We've been able to achieve that by meeting great guys like Luke and Amool. And real diverse organizations in the space. And we've also come to believe that technology is actually all about the human experience, not just during the implementation, but the ultimate beneficiary of technology are human beings. And so that needs to be kept in mind all the way through. So there's been great learning in that space. And in terms of today's session, what would be great to sort of discuss and learn about is how these guys went about selecting their platforms, what sort of thought process goes into selecting the particular fundraising solutions that have been implemented, and how you measure success on the other side, away from the actual tech. How do you know it's been successful? How do people adopt to it? How do you deal with change? How do you deal with technology? In smaller organizations as well as larger ones. So I think those would be great outcomes.
Perfect. Thank you, Jan. Well, as we mentioned earlier, it's much more around listening to responses from Luke, Amool, and also from Victor. That's what hopefully the people on the call are certainly more interested in. So I might I'll start with some of the questions. And actually, Luke, I'll start with yourself, and one that's probably less technically focused, but just so we can give a little bit more background as well to some of the listeners. Is can you tell us a little bit about Greenpeace and how you and the team there go about social change?
Sure. One of the nice things about working with Greenpeace is that it's right there in the name, a green and peaceful future. That's what we're working towards. Fairly obviously, the significant majority of our work's around climate change, biggest existential threat to humanity at the moment. And so when you're thinking about fostering a green and peaceful future, that's pretty up there in terms of the kinds of things that you need to work on. Really, Greenpeace is a pretty it's a very established brand and well-known organization with a well-known way of doing things in many respects, but working through campaigns to get movement in the world that sees real-world impact. So, for example, at the moment, we're running a really large campaign around corporate renewables and getting organizations to go 100% renewable in their energy purchasing, and it's really significant in Australia. That's whole percentage points of Australia's energy consumption is through these kinds of organizations that we're working with and talking to about how they choose to procure their energy. And obviously the business community of Australia is quite a significant stakeholder in Australia's future. So yeah, I mean, at the moment, predominantly around climate. We also work in the Pacific, so working with Pacific Island nations on what's going on there is really the people that are seeing the effects of climate change firsthand. And so how do we work with those folks and tell their stories in the region as well? Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so then moving slightly towards the more technical side of things, or I guess implementation focused side of things, can you talk about why you decided to look for a new digital fundraising platform? And I guess in part of that question, what was the most important element or elements of what you were looking for as part of that selection process?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, our decision was relatively easy because when I joined the organization, actually our old platforms were really old and really creaking under the strain of being, having been around for such a long period of time. And so the kinds of things that we needed out of our platform were kind of the things that you would expect from modern technology. So it needed to be cloud-based so that people could access it from anywhere. It needed to be able to support lots of users because we've got lots of staff that need to be able to work with it. We need to have good data integrity so that we can make sure we have a consistent view of our supporters, whether they be financial supporters or non-financial supporters. And so in some respects, it was quite the first round of requirements were quite obvious. There were the things that you kind of know that you need to have if you're looking at the technology needs of an organization. It doesn't matter whether it's an old organization or a new organization. For me, it was really important that we didn't just look at fundraising needs, but of course that's an important element of what we looked at, but actually that we could find a platform and a set of tooling that worked across the whole organization, from campaigns to organizational services to fundraising to technology, that really could be used and service all those different parts of the organization. Because as in most organizations, the bits of the organization can't live in silos. They have to work together and achieve the mission together. And so if we're just deploying it in one bit over there, that's actually not a good outcome for us. We need an outcome where actually the platform is used across the whole organization to achieve the whole organization's goals, not just a specific bit in the corner.
Absolutely perfect. Okay, great. Amool, I'll direct a question your way because it's probably a relevant one, as you started to provide a little bit of background around the initial, I guess, state of affairs or the fundraising solution prior to implementing a Salesforce solution. So can you give some background, I guess, around that existing solution and some of the common pain points that I'm sure people on the call will be very familiar with, and they're going to be very consistent themes amongst other not-for-profit organizations?
Sure. Just want to touch base on Trust for Nature for a brief moment, and so that it gives you a bit of a background on the pain points.
Sure.
So Trust for Nature is a land and wildlife conservation organization. It works with private landholders across Victoria to put a legally binding agreement. They call it conservation covenant. It actually goes on title of the land, and it stays on title for the life of the land, so forever. What it does, it provides Trust for Nature an opportunity to conserve, protect the conservational area aspects of that land or the property, so that the native endangered or vulnerable species can continue to stay on into for future generations, for our children and our children's children. And being in that area, we had with such a business, and also Trust for Nature is a not-for-profit, so it had this other wing of fundraising aspect where they rely a lot on the good, the donations of supporters for a lot of their projects and activities. We had these two core requirements, but what we had to start with was a Microsoft Access database and a cloud-based fundraising solution. They're two different platforms, two different technologies. Microsoft Access probably is from before my time, before I was born, so it's very old, very clunky. As Luke said, it makes the creaky sounds when you open it. And Microsoft Access, neither not Microsoft Access nor the old fundraising platform were flexible or elastic. You can't put anything new in them and make it work. So we were struggling. Our organization, our staff, they were also based all over Victoria. We have 10 offices across Victoria. We have the staff members that do a lot of field work. So it was very difficult. They were all maintaining their own spreadsheets. At the end of the financial year, when you're doing an annual report and someone wants to report number of conservation covenants we did in that year, that financial year, or how many we're negotiating, we would probably get 2 or 3 numbers from different people. So it was very difficult maintaining data integrity. We had data duplication. We had a donor on fundraising platform and the same donor as a covenantor and a volunteer in a volunteer spreadsheet. So we had data duplication issues. So when I looked at it, we had this big problem, but we started off with one main goal, which is to get ourselves off Microsoft Access database. And that's where our journey to find something good and better started off. Is that the answer to your question, Steve?
Absolutely, and I think it's just a lot of common themes in there. So, from the data duplication, the non-cloud or non-connected solution, which is certainly very, very common threads amongst a lot of our customers, and certainly very common amongst the community as well, and people looking for a solution. So I'll throw one your way, Victor, as well, because it's probably, before I get just a bit more specifics, it's probably important for people on the call to understand a bit more about Salesforce and the platform itself. So could you provide, I guess, a quick overview of the platform in more general terms, without that, I guess, both how it can serve a fundraising purpose, but also in general terms, like I said?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. At the core of it, Salesforce is a connected constituent platform. It's all about managing the complex relationships that we know that these not-for-profit organizations have. You have individuals who are your donors, but they might also volunteer for you, or they might also be someone that you're delivering a program to. And Salesforce is all about tracking those relationships across all the different facets of your business, and moving away from just manual tasks to automating and creating streamlined workflows. It's all based in the cloud. Salesforce handles all the complex architecture and upkeep and updates to the software. And it's really just about empowering these organizations to do their mission in a digital way.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. It's certainly a good overview for people on the call that may be wondering what in fact it is and how Salesforce fits, I guess, as the main piece in the puzzle. So I'll go following that question, I'll go back to yourself, Luke, and can you shed some light on, I guess, how you went through the evaluation? Salesforce is not the only option out there, and there's obviously other things to look at. So there was a process, I'm sure, that you went through to evaluate your future state platform. And did you want to provide some information on, I guess, that process and what you went through in order to come to the outcome that you ultimately got to?
Yeah, sure. So obviously we had lots of conversations internally about what it is that we were looking for, what the needs were. I spent a lot of time talking to people just about their jobs and what they did, the pain points, the opportunities they saw, what was working for them, where there were things like that, and lots of things that weren't working for them. Really out of that, we did a bunch of market research, and the market research at the first stage was really about finding the classes of products that were available. And so, Salesforce and other products of it'll kind of fit in this, larger CRM kind of class, but there are other classes. There are smaller CRMs. You can go down the custom build route if you're feeling particularly masochistic. You can get little startups. There's lots of little startups now that are doing stuff in this space as well. And so for us, it was really important, before we even got into which product, we wanted to make sure we were picking the right category of product so that we were comparing apples with apples. And so before we went into the specifics of the product features or the pricing or even speaking to any of the vendors, we wanted to have a pretty clear idea about the kind of product that we wanted. As you can, as is obvious historically, we landed with the larger CRM kind of products, and that was really emergent out of the kind of needs we had inside the organization. And for us, because we actually have some relatively complex needs, we're an older organization. We're 50 years old next year, sorry. And I'm getting ahead of myself. But there's lots of really complex data flows. There's lots of really interesting interactions. We wanted to be able to support all those kinds of things. For us, I'm of the professional belief and the personal philosophy that there's just not really any room to custom build software from scratch anymore. Unless you have some very, very specific needs, there's just no reason to do it. And if you have that specific set of need, you're probably a startup. Building software is kind of your core business. But unless building software is your core business, I'm not really sure why anyone would go out and build a CRM from scratch anymore. So that option very quickly disappeared. Working with startups, we toyed with a little bit, but the risk profile was probably a little bit high for us, especially with the size of our supporter base. The smaller CRMs typically just didn't have the feature set, and so we would have had to modify them too much to really get the kind of functionality that we needed out of the products, which left us with the larger CRM offerings to then explore. So once we, narrowed down on, when we need one of the, the larger products, then it was about looking at the actual products in market. So we went out and did the desktop research that you have to do and said, okay, well, here's the long list and then here's the short list. And then we started having the conversations with the people in the short list and saying, okay, well, what do you offer? What's your unique value proposition? What are you doing with people in the space? Do you have specific capacity or capability when it comes to the third sector, where that's even relevant, because sometimes it's not relevant. And then really, ultimately, what does implementation look like? And so do you have a strong partner ecosystem, or are we off doing it ourselves, or what's the balance between those needs then? Yeah, so that's probably the high level of how we went about product selection.
Excellent. That's perfect. I think just to bolt on to the end of that, was there anything, I guess, that surprised you from the selection in a positive way, as in it was a more beneficial component of Salesforce and going in that route that potentially you weren't expecting, or part of the platform that may have been a feature that, because obviously there was some focus clearly on fundraising, but it's a larger platform play being Salesforce. Was there anything that just stood out in your mind at all? There's something that Salesforce provides beyond just the collecting of dollars from people and sending receipts style functionality?
I think the adaptability was quite important to us. So we needed to be able to take what was there and kind of mold it a bit. And some of the products in market are better at that and some are not so great in that. And of course, that depends on the particular organization that's using the product too. If you're a smaller organization, you may well not have the resourcing or inclination to do modifications on what's, comes out of the box, and that's fine and that's great. But for us, we needed to be able to do a certain amount of modification. And so the developer ecosystem and tooling was quite important on that front, yeah.
Excellent. Makes perfect sense. Back to yourself, Amool. If I would go to less technical as well and focus on the actual journey from, sort of the start date to the go live and starting to work daily with Salesforce, I think it's probably beneficial to shed some light on any challenge you encountered along the way, because there's, no project is perfect. There's always speed bump or turbulence along the way. So I wanted to take it a bit more in that direction, and if you could provide the people on the call with some overview of some of those, I guess, gotchas or things that certainly came up in your experience when implementing a new digital solution.
Right. I think the biggest challenge that Trust for Nature had was bringing the data from these two legacy systems into Salesforce. First, we have duplication already. That was a problem. And then bringing that into a schematic that is completely different to the first two ones was a bit of a challenge. First, we went live with conservation database, which brought all the property and species and ecological vegetation class, the landowners, the title data, all of that across. And then we went live with fundraising solution with Vertic's NPSP Plus. And this process of migrating data from legacy systems to Salesforce was one of the biggest challenges we had. It took us, that's the longest part of the project. It took us more amount of time than actually training staff or implementing the solution. It's the data migration that was the biggest challenge that we came across in this process.
I had somewhat of a feeling you were going to say that and point that out, given that's also a very common experience, and one that's the thought process is often, I guess, neglected, or I think just probably skipped over when you're just immediately thinking about, okay, how am I going to take $1 from A and put it over here, and then forgetting that, hang on, in a majority of situations, there's a legacy system where we need to pick up all of this and move it over there. So it's certainly a common experience and one that is something we encounter daily. So I'll throw a question your way, Jan. I think we've heard a bit more.
I can add one quick learning to viewers. It's always good to know your legacy data inside out, not just having the idea about it. Knowing your data and the data schema of your legacy systems beforehand will give you a much better advantage when you're moving that into the new system. That's very important.
Perfect. Apologies for cutting you off. Absolutely.
Sorry for cutting you off.
That's a great response. So, coming over to yourself, and then less from the customer side and more from the implementation side of things. A couple of questions. So, Amool just touched on it now about implementing the MPSP Plus solution. That is something that we've compiled and put together. It's probably beneficial now to segue into giving some background on what that is, and then also there's an element of, when we talk fundraising, we're obviously talking payments and how we're processing payments, and how, if you could just call out or highlight some of the differences about how Salesforce as a platform with the MPSP Plus handles the payment processing, and how we do it in a secure and sort of, scalable fashion as well.
Yeah, sure. So our journey on the NPSP Plus fundraising solution has been probably a 10-year journey, where we really only thought about productizing it in the last 2 years or so. And I think Luke spoke to this already. There are different classes of software available, and there are different classes of fundraising platforms available. And one thing we were very strong on is that we didn't just want to put a fundraising solution together just to have another fundraising solution on the market. We wanted to be clever about it, and we wanted to take the learnings of the last 8 to 10 years of putting these solutions into social organizations and really put something to our customers that is quite unique. So rather than thinking about the technology, we thought about the design principles behind how we're going to put this solution together. And a few come to mind that are quite important and remain very, very important to us to this day. The first one is that we are very, very closely aligned to where Salesforce is going as a platform, particularly with the Nonprofit Success Pack, which is geared totally towards the social sector and social organizations. So we are natively totally on top of that. We didn't want to rewrite another payment engine into Salesforce. There are enough of those. So through our learning, particularly in the Greenpeace project, actually, we found that if we were to delegate out the payment processing to a payment gateway rather than bring that into Salesforce, not only could we achieve more scale and more reliability and more compliance around security and PCI and so forth, we could actually have a much better architected solution. We were not finding that we're rewriting or redeveloping work that's already been done by somebody else. So we decided to go with a single payment gateway in Stripe, which we deem to be the best one in the market, like Salesforce is the best on-demand CRM platform in the market. And we combined those two platforms to put puzzle pieces together rather than build a payment engine back into Salesforce. And so what that allows our customers to do, if we look at the lifetime of a typical digital solution being 5 to 10 years at a minimum, it allows our customers to stay on track with both enhancements in the Salesforce platform as well as the Stripe platform. And so that became very, very important to us. We focused primarily on the things that the Nonprofit Success Pack at the moment doesn't offer, such as payments, receipting, donation pages, and so forth. And so we sort of combining the best of all worlds, we call it, by putting pieces of a puzzle together rather than building heavy payment solutions into Salesforce itself.
Perfect. Makes total sense. Coming back to yourself, Luke, and towards, so following on, I guess that selection process has been made, the choices have been made, and which way the business is heading in from the technical underpinning of the solution. Can you talk about, because there's obviously there's a lot of work that's required both externally and internally once the project starts, which can sometimes, I guess, be a little bit underestimated from if you're using a partner externally, but also requirements on your team internally and how the process is going to unfold to really get to where you want to go. So can you talk about some of those internal items that you identified needed to be managed, things like change management and user adoption, I guess, and how you put processes in along the way to make sure you both had capacity internally and were focusing on those sorts of elements that were going to make sure when you turned it on that everybody knew what on actually meant?
Sure. So it's kind of like, what was the internal stuff that we had to do beyond the technology?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, I mean, change management is huge, right? Like you've got an organization that's been using a platform for some amount of time, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, like there's all kinds of adopted behaviors and ways of working, many of which are implied or assumed or frankly abuses of the existing piece of software that it was never designed to do. And that's because the people in the organization have had needs and they've found ways to meet those needs. And so it's not enough to just look at the existing software and go, what does the existing software do? You actually have to go a step further and go, well, what are people using the existing software to do? Where are they putting credit card numbers in address fields instead, because that's the easiest place for them to find? Where are they, and so you've got a PCI challenge. Where are they putting in, how are they dealing with like household accounts when the existing software only has individual accounts? Or, how are they, all these kinds of things where, and every organization will be different, all these kinds of things where people are basically making do or finding ways through the software rather than with the software. And so your change management is not just about before you did X and now you have to do Y. It's actually, well, I need to spend more time understanding all the things that you did up over here so we can help find not just the direct translation, but the way that we can lift that in the new world that we're looking at. Because often technology has changed and we can find a better way to do some of those things, like properly tokenizing credit card numbers instead of storing them in free text fields. So there's things where technology can actually make our lives easier if we step back for a moment and go, how can we do that better, rather than just how can we directly translate it over to the new system. So it won't surprise you, lots of conversations again. You got to talk to people a lot. We had great success with a really how would I describe it? Tightly formed isn't quite the right word, but a CRM working group, basically, that was commissioned right at the very start of the project. And when I say start, I mean before we even started any procurement. Before we spoke to a single vendor, before we spoke to anyone, we formed this group to say, look, you are the main subject matter expertise people in the organization. You're the main cultural influencers. You're the people who will make this successful or not. Because I guarantee you, just me standing up the front is not going to make a project successful. You got to get the people in there as a team. And so we had them all the way from the start, and they were involved in every stage of the project. What do we need? What kind of products are we talking about? Who are we going to work with? How are we going to roll it out? What's the spec? What's the phasing? What's the budget? What's the everything, all the way from the very start to the very end. And that was super important because those people became the advocates internally within their own spheres of influence. And so those people that were then able to go back into the organization and say, hey, we're doing this thing, but also they could surface challenges as they arose throughout the project. In the later stages of the project, it was actually really important that we built momentum around the project, but also we didn't want to do this thing that I've seen technology projects fail because of in the past, where everyone's going, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then one day we launch and then it's a big bang. And then, oh, it doesn't have the thing that I thought it was going to have. Oh, I'm a bit sad now. And so there's this hilarious technology deployment graph that I'm sure there's an XKCD for, actually. It kind of just ramps up and then kind of drops off a cliff, and you've just wasted all the enthusiasm. And so we didn't want to do that at all. We said, no, we're going to involve the whole organization all the way through. So in the earlier stages, first, sprint that we did, here's what we've done. It doesn't look like much, does it? That's because we're only just starting. 2 weeks later, we'll do another one. 2 weeks later, we'll do another one. And so we were doing showcases all the way through the development. So people were seeing how the product was evolving well and truly before it actually got out into the organization for people to use. And we made those things parties. We converted the boardroom. We brought in plants. I think we had a smoke machine at one point. We made that thing a celebration so that there was enthusiasm for it, but also a reality about what it was that we were actually doing. Yeah, that's a bit of some snippets of the kinds of things that we did to try and get, and not just try, we did get people on board all the way through that journey.
Perfect. That's a perfect response, and I think there's that appreciation that it's, whilst if you may use a partner, certainly like a Vertic to get to the end goal, it's certainly a dual approach, a team collaborative approach, and that both parties need to be along for the ride, regardless of the roles that they're playing. They can be chopped and changed. And I know, for example, if I take the Greenpeace experience, you also had an internal technical team, and managing, meshing those together. But it's certainly it's that approach that makes sure that, like you said, when we go live, people understand what we're doing.
Yeah, but I just on that internal team, it was actually really important to me that the project wasn't owned by owned exclusively by that internal technical team. Obviously, they're key stakeholders, and obviously they're the ones who did the lion's share of the work, and to them is all the credit and the success. But actually, it was really important that people from across the organization were involved all the way through. Because if only the technical team is involved, whether your technical team is 1 person or 5 people or 10 people, then at the end of the day, no one's going to be bought in when you come to launch day. So it's so important to get people from across the whole organization involved, from your executive director or your CEO all the way through the organization. It's just so important.
Perfect. Well, I think Luke's just said half the things you were probably going to finish with, because that's absolutely, it's better that it comes from yourself. So that's certainly that's what we try to articulate, and certainly you've done a much better job than we can, coming directly from your experience as a coalface, and that's absolutely that's a very key message in terms of the entire end-to-end journey. Thank you for that. Back to Amool. If we talk, I want to talk about you are going live. TFN's Trust for Nature is using Salesforce. They're collecting money. The fundraising solution is working. It's probably now a good time to highlight some of those. What have been pick the top 3 most beneficial components of moving to like the cloud-based system, away from the Access database that was built before you and I were born, and how you're those benefits, I guess, on a day-to-day level for the users. I think you're muted, Amool.
Cool. The first one, thanks for that, Steve. The first benefit that I can shout out loud from the rooftop is having all staff using one application, having one platform, one product for all their business functions. We have Salesforce now is used for fundraising. It's used for CRM. It's used for our conservation management. It is also used for our legal side of our conservation tracking, covenant implementation tracking, and it is also used for front desk. Having one system that does everything was one of the biggest benefits, and that is very important for us, because every staff member can see their the information that is required for their role in one system, so they don't have to get on the phone, they don't have to send an email, and they don't have to duplicate the data somewhere else. So that was one of the biggest benefits from an organizational level. From the fundraising platform level, having Salesforce integrated with NPSP Plus gave us a very good benefit, where we don't have to look at any manual processing of our donations. Previously, before we implemented fundraising, every month on the 22nd or 23rd of the month, if it's a working day, one of our fundraising team members would sit in there and process regular donations every month. Whereas now, NPSP Plus, clubbed with our recurring donations in Salesforce, it does the job by itself based on Stripe subscriptions. Our staff member is released from that task, and he can spend more time engaging our donors. So that's the biggest second. Well, on the fundraising side again, having the website integrate with Salesforce forms, with NPSP Plus or NPSP forms, gave us an opportunity to capture donations for multiple campaigns into their specific funds, which is also very good in a way for us, because we don't now get donations from the website into one single bucket and manually have to separate them out or allocate them to different funds in our financials. They're all already allocated to different funds in our financials. That's on the fundraising side. That's the second benefit. The third one is I'm going to talk about conservation database, because it's really important for Trust for Nature. That also does. We got a lot out of having conservation database implemented, conservation management on Salesforce, and Vertic helped us implement that too as the first phase of implementation. I'm not sure if Steve or Jan remember, this was a number of months ago. Having that there was actually very good, because now if one of the staff members have this very good idea and they want to implement that, they want to make a small business process change for efficiency. Back in those days, Access wouldn't allow us. But Salesforce being such a flexible solution, such a flexible platform, it gives me an opportunity to quickly whip up a small app or new object and create the functions and the fields and the relationships they need, and create a workflow, a flow of data, and then test it. That works. If it doesn't work, chuck it away and then make changes, or quickly implement that into production. So that was very good for us. From an idea to a solution, working solution for us right now, it takes us about a couple of weeks. So that's another big benefit that we saw having Salesforce in our environment, in our technical architecture.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And that's probably a good way to throw it back. I haven't forgotten about you, Victor, and throw it back over to yourself. And we've obviously spoken all about fundraising, but I think as we've heard from Amool and also from Luke, there are Salesforce being a platform play rather than just a straight vertical application in that space. Did you want to provide a bit of maybe some overview and information around some of the other things you've seen Salesforce used for in the sector? So there's a lot of big people on listening and on the call. There'll be multifaceted organizations that will do fundraising, will be one of the many functions that is part of the larger mission. So could you maybe shed some light on some of the other commonly used sort of delivered requirements and features that you've seen Salesforce fulfill?
Absolutely, and I think it's a great point, and I think we've actually got two great examples of that here with us today. In that we work with so many organisations that touch the community in so many different ways, and fundraising is just one small part of that. And a lot of what Salesforce also helps organisations do is really about achieving the mission. So within the Not-for-Profit Success Pack, there are a number of modules around program management and case management, really allowing organisations to streamline the technical delivery of these programs, making sure that they can actually focus, and their caseworkers, their staff can focus on doing the job they love, that is interacting with the community, interacting with your clients, depending on who it is, or whether it's animals, and tracking them and making sure that we're giving every single individual, every single person and being that we're interacting with the respect and the time that they deserve, and following through on a program that is auditable, so that we can stand by our results and deliver them and be transparent with the community about the results that these organisations are achieving. You know, we want to be able to help you shout these results from the rooftops with confidence in the data, with your team being engaged in the platform, but really allowing you to really interact with the organisation and the mission that you're trying to serve, the change that you're trying to do with the world. We want to be that technology to underpin that. And we see many great organisations, you know, doing that with program management and case management on the Salesforce platform, and in addition to the fundraising and the marketing automation that you can also do, as you said, Steve.
Perfect. Thanks, Victor. So we've heard obviously a lot of the customer journey and how they go about the start to finish process of going live with a fundraising or digital solution. Jan, did you want to chime in at this point then around some of those things we see? Because often the implementations involve an organization like a Vertic to assist the organization along the way in their journey. So perhaps you could shed some light on, I guess, some of the challenges that we see from our side and some learnings that you think might be beneficial to share with people on the call today.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Luke and Amool both spoke to different points on that. The first one is that I think there needs to be a real willingness to look at process and current environment and current technology and be open to change to actually come out in a better place than you started with. And if at the end of the project, no matter how it was conducted and no matter how we went about it, if as an organization you don't feel that you're in a better place, then we probably haven't done our job well enough. And so there needs to be a real change mindset for a start, and that's one of the most common challenges we come across is being a partner with our clients in that mindset shift journey, so to speak. And I think the second point, and Amool, you spoke to that, is that one of our biggest learning is that, well, how do we actually look at technology and what do we want from it? And in the end, our learning has been that overwhelmingly the benefits of technology are human rather than digital and rather than technical. And what that means is that we look to give you solutions and work with you to build the things that machines should be doing, like issuing receipts when a donation comes in and retrying a failed recurring gift. Machines are very, very good at doing that, and giving you time back to focus on the things that are really important. Engaging with your stakeholders, engaging with your supporters, implementing better programs for the community so we can all live in a better place. That's, again, overwhelmingly a human task, and the machine shouldn't take that from you. And so really it's how we look at digital implementations that drive success or failure. And if we just look at feature by feature replacement of current state, then that's probably not the way to go about it. You want to look at, well, how do I want to function as an organization? How do I make sure my users are actually going to use this software? And I remember those smoke machine showcases, and people really get excited about this stuff, and they get really excited about technology. And it's when we do that technology can make an actual difference in a social organization. And it's only then that we'll see success. And so our implementations are very focused on that, showcasing, telling the stories along the way. We might show you very little, but many, many times, rather than one big thing at the very end when we've potentially missed the boat on our thinking. And so everything is geared towards the human experience throughout. Everything is geared towards addressing emotions that are coming up: excitement, anxiety, fear of change, excitement of change. There's both positive and negative emotion involved. And so we're going to consider all of that, and a truly reliable and successful implementation methodology considers those things first before it looks at the process of, well, what does your documentation look like? What does your Jira instance look like? What does an approval process look like? Those are secondary to how do we want to work as people? How do we want to interact? What's our social contract? How do we measure success? What's important to you? So if you look at the team that Luke's referring to, I think there were about 4 or 5 key staff members in that team, and each of them measured success differently. And it was very important for us to understand each of those guys' motivations and how they look at success of a system. Same within Trust for Nature. Different stakeholders will look at technology differently and what they can get out of it. So it's much more that side that's important than the technical implementation, because we know the Salesforce platform works. It's been proven. Over 50,000 social organizations are using it. So the tech is never going to fail if people approach it the right way.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for that summary. So, look, in the interest of time, there's I was hoping to keep today's session light and brief, so I haven't certainly got to all the questions, but I would like to close in terms of just hearing from each of you, I guess, and go around the room and maybe get some thoughts on maybe a question I haven't asked, or something you think is relevant to share. So I'll start with yourself, Amool. Did you want to? Is there anything you'd like to close with or share with people on the call today?
It's a very good opportunity. Thanks, Steve. I think technology is not at all an enemy. I think technology is there to help us do what we do best. For example, I'm a technology consultant, and I love to enable my users to do their jobs better by giving them the tools they need to do their jobs. And those tools are the technology. A wrench is a technology. A spanner is a piece of technology. Same with Salesforce. Salesforce is a piece of technology. We want to enable our staff to use these tools better. That helps them do their jobs better and take away the mundane, painful process. No technology is perfect, but Technology is there to help us do our jobs better and take away a lot of pain points. And if we approach that with that perspective, as Jan just mentioned, technology will give us a lot of a lot of benefit to do our jobs better and to make this world a better place. Absolutely.
Oh, I just
You're on mute,
realised.
Steve.
Thank you. That's I was saying some very nice words, and they're all missed. So, no, thank you, Amool. That's a lovely sentiment to finish with. And yourself, Luke. Any final thoughts for anybody on the call?
Amool, I thought your comments were really good. I believe a lot of that. I actually I stumbled upon this letter by one of my favorite authors, Ursula Le Guin, recently. And one of the things I find just so great about Ursula Le Guin's writing is it sometimes it doesn't feel like sci-fi, but it's definitely sci-fi. And this letter that she writes is basically a bit of a response to people who are criticizing her for not writing hard sci-fi. It doesn't have lasers and computers and spaceships and robots in it. And there's this line in the middle of it that I just think is so perfect. It goes, "Technology is the active human interface with the material world." It's the active human interface with the material world. A match is technology, right? A hammer is technology, like Amool was saying. Yeah, sure, Salesforce is technology, computers technology, but they're only useful when they're the active human interface with the material world. They've got to be active. You've got to use them. You've got to have people using them. You've got to engage with it. Otherwise, it's useless. It's about the human interface. It's about the connection between the people that are actually doing something, and it's the material world. At the end of the day, we're not here just to move bits around on some server somewhere. We're here to do real work. And so the role of technology is that active human interface with the material world. And I think that's the thing that I would say is most important in technology projects, is remembering the why you're doing it. Greenpeace is doing it because we want a green and peaceful planet. Why are you doing it? Not just because you want to run a technology project. No one does that. Definitely don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Perfect. I think that's probably the best way to finish. I think that no question could have teased that out. I thank you for those responses, because I think that exactly underpins everything that we're talking about today, and it's great to hear it direct from both of you guys as well. So very much thank you for that. I can certainly see Jan using some of that commentary as well, because I think it really fits really nicely, and I think it resonates with everybody that's going to be on the call today. So thank you for that again. Victor, yourself from a Salesforce sort of platform vendor perspective, was there anything you'd like to finish with and share with everybody?
Oh, well, firstly, look, thanks, Amool. Thanks, Luke, for the time and the insight. It's always great to hear the customer point of view on transformations and ones that have made a real impact to the organisations that you serve. It's actually a point that both Luke and Jan made along the way, but I kind of really wanted to reinforce it. The most successful transformation projects, and for the people on the call that are thinking about it, I know it's about to be a scary step to go in there and start to change things and redevelop and focus on a digital platform. But if you build the right people that aren't just technical, so that's the SMEs that Luke was talking about, and making sure that this is actually going to apply to people across the business. And then don't just try and do a like-for-like replacement. So that's a slightly better UI, it's a slightly cleaner workflow than you have today. You really need to think about, if we're going to make this investment, what is our organisation going to be like in 5 years' time? And how will this help us step by step? Like Luke said, there's different sprints, and we aren't going to be coming out in a week's time with a brand new transformation project. We've got to bring the organisation on the journey. But it's where you're going to be in 5 years' time to help you make that decision about what group of CRM or what group of software vendor is going to be the right fit for your organisation, and looking for someone that's got a strong partnership to help you on that journey with your digital transformation. That would be they're the most successful projects that we've seen. Thanks, Steve.
No problem. Fantastic, absolutely. And lastly, Jan, yourself, from any angle, actually, from the partner side, or any sort of learning or sharing that sort of springs to mind.
Sure, it's a little bit difficult going last on this one because some fantastic points being made, all of which I agree with. I think where I would finish is that there's this saying that says, don't sweat the small stuff. And we look at that fundamentally the other way, that we think that the larger decisions both in terms of technology and adoption and choice and function, the larger decisions will take care of themselves. And our experience has taught us that people actually know where they want to go, and they know what they want to do. And so then it all comes down to the small stuff for us. And that's both in terms of interaction, that come, the small human elements that come into it, but it's also the technology. It doesn't have to be super complex to be super efficient. In fact, most of the time it shouldn't be. And so my advice would be to actually focus on the small things in all dimensions of a digital transformation, and because that's where success sits, that's where it lives, and that's where failure also lives. And so I would pay attention to that.
Fantastic. Great sort of different perspectives on the journey and different ways to look at it. So, well, look, that brings us to the end of our hour and what we wanted to cover today. So personally, from myself, I'd love to thank everybody that's both listening, but certainly everybody that's on the call today. Thank you for sharing your learnings, your advice, your pearls of wisdom with everybody, and it's certainly much appreciated. And I hope that everybody that's listening has certainly extracted something from it that can assist them in their digital transformation journey. And again, certainly it's something that I certainly thank you very much personally for, and I hope that the people on the call certainly get some benefit from. So thank you very much for that, and again, thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Bye.